Check it out now with Chunk Show Brother.
Hello, people. A Chunk here. Welcome to episode 2 of Brick by Brick for the map Vessel. My original plan for this episode was to talk over a time lapse of me forging the remainder of the blockout, but after watching it through, I realized that it's pretty hard to make out what's happening, and it's really not that interesting to watch. So, I'm still going to show part of the time lapse, but then we're going to jump right into a walkthrough of the completed blockout so you can get a better grasp of what it's looking like. Just to give you some sense of how long I take to do my blockouts, in the first episode of the series I had the blockout probably about halfway done. This second half took me about 3 hours of actual forging time. I spent probably, I would say, 6 hours in Forge altogether, but about half of that time was spent either double checking to make sure that movement options and lines of sight worked like I wanted them to, or just idling while I was doing other stuff like eating and browsing online. Altogether, I probably spent around 15 hours in Forge from beginning to end to do this blockout. And I would say that's probably pretty typical for me for a blockout. Pretty early on in starting the second half of this blockout, I noticed that I had actually messed up my scaling. First of all, I had made the map too short vertically. When I was working in Halo 2 Anniversary, I wasn't really sure about what the clamber height was, but I knew that I wanted it so that it wasn't possible to clamber directly up from one level to the next. So I made a guess, and I built each of my levels 2.5 units high. In Halo 5, I wasn't initially sure how units converted over into feet, so I made my levels 17 feet apart, which is the actual height needed to prevent clambering. To keep the original scaling, they actually should have been closer to 24 or 25 feet apart. I also noticed as I began working on the center walkways that I had scaled the map about 1 unit too small in every direction horizontally. Even though it wasn't the size I had originally planned, I decided to complete the blockout with the scaling as is. I mostly made that decision because I wasn't initially sure what the player count would be anyway. My plan now is to test the map with this scaling and see how it plays. After a few tests, I should be able to decide what the ideal player count will be, and then I can adjust the scaling from there if I need to. The nice thing is that with grouping, we can actually rescale our maps pretty easily now, so scaling isn't really as major of a concern as it's been in the previous games. There was one other little accident that came to light also as I was completing the blockout. I realized that I was able to clamber up to the 3rd level in one spot that I hadn't really intended. I've also decided to leave that as is, and we'll just see what impact it has in the playtest. See, this is the great thing about blockouts. I can go into testing now knowing that nothing is final, and it really gives me an opportunity to be a little more experimental with my designs. You'll probably notice that the forging is pretty rough around the edges. I don't really concern myself with lining up everything perfectly. I don't really worry about cleaning up the top edges of the walling to make them even like I usually would on a polished version. And as you can see, I stuck lights everywhere just to make sure that the visibility would be good. The lighting will be completely redone in the final version. Probably the most obvious thing is that I haven't bothered with coloring pieces at all. Everything is the same color. That will definitely change in the final version. In fact, I would say that almost every single item on the map will be altered in some way or another before the map is finalized. Whether that means moving them, changing them out for different pieces, or maybe even deleting pieces altogether to adjust sightlines. All in all, I think this blockout went pretty smoothly for my first map in a new game. I'm going to leave you now with a quick walkthrough of the completed blockout. The next step in my process will be to place spawns and weapons in preparation for playtesting. That's what we'll be talking about in the next episode. Enjoy the rest of the walkthrough. Later, people.